I'm Ken Jones, and I worked for J.L. Stevens the Builder for many years. I had just about finished my apprenticeship when this hall was being built. The job wasn't going to go anywhere else. J.L. Stevens were going to do it because they were the village builder. They were one of the biggest builders probably around at the time, employing about 20 then, I expect. And really that's how it all came about. I can remember J.L. Stevens, Lloyd Stevens as he was known then, because although he wasn't on site every day, he'd be at the office and he would attend the meetings. Things like the painting in the toilets and the showers, it was done by Ronnie Hemmings, who was trained to use Portafleck paint. And I think you find it still in the showers now. And it's very difficult to put anything over the top. Little things like the beam that goes through the middle of the hall, it's an RSJ, and we used to walk from one side of the hall to the other across that, not to have to walk right around the scaffolding. Well, of course, this day and age, it would be really illegal. But it was classed as fun. It was classed as being, part of the building fun. And moving on, I'd have days here and then I'd have days where we went back to work in the workshop, making the windows, making the sort of screen and the doors and things like that, coming back and fitting them, which plastering would have involved Ron Jones and a few others, which are Les Smith and something or other, which have sadly passed away. But the surround the stage, I can remember the architect and them having a big talk about it, and obviously I was working on something else and perhaps shouldn't have heard it. And I can remember JL saying, I don't think we should plaster around them, we should make that a feature and have some nice hardwood around it. And I think that he was prepared to do it for the community, for the hall, as opposed to being paid for it to that extent. I mean, this was a fantastic hall for the time. It was one of the futuristic halls and one of the first for the communities about. The money was raised through Henderson, J.L. Stevens, Doug Mason as a community councillor. I think Ron Jones was a community councillor then. And as far as I remember, they were the driving force on this because they could see that the old tin hall was out of reach of the village. It was becoming out of touch of what was going on in the 60s. And it's fortunate because this building is such a good building for its usage. The planning was that at some times they could have 3 meetings. Like if the community had a meeting, they'd have it up here on the stage. You might have something else going on in the first start, then the far end of the hall would be shut off with the soundproof door, and you'd have something else going in there. You might have some women in the kitchen, doing teas and things for these. And even if they had to go out the back door and come back in the other door, it worked. The toilets outside were wonderful because the cricket and football all used them. They didn't have to come into the hall other than through the back door to wash their muddy boots and things like that off. And like a Saturday, there'd always be football out on the field, and so they'd all be coming back here. Sometimes I presume they'd have a cup of tea and something, but unless they wanted to go off to the pub. And it grew the community without any doubt, where the old hall, it wasn't far out of the village, but it was a basic tin shed. So they could see that you could have wedding parties here, which Dwen and I actually had our wedding reception here. You had nights of discos, you had YFC plays and community things. One of the funny ones that, and it's quite a few years later, there was to be a political talk here one night, and I think it was Heseltine was the man that was coming, and I think it was the Scouts and that were here, and Jack Seabrook, John as he was properly known, was with them. Who was taking them? It was probably, would it have been Mr. Jackson, the vicar or not then, I can't remember. But they decided they wanted this piano from down at the bottom there up onto the stage. So Jack said, these boys are good boys, they'll lift that up there. Sadly, they failed. And the piano went down onto the ground. And the lid came off and the front came off. And I think one of the piano hinges came apart. There must have been a sort of silence here, and what do we do? Well, they obviously closed up, and I get a knock on the house door later on. Ken, we've got a bit of a problem up the hall, whether you could help us out or not. We've moved the piano and we do need it for the night of the speech sort of thing, but we're going to move it up onto the stage, but it's got broken. So I said, well, look, I can't come tonight, but I'll come next night or whatever it was. And I came up and I did put it back together. It wasn't badly damaged. And I presume it's still the same these days. I can't tell you what the damage was, but I fixed it. The cricket club would have their New Year's night party here, which would wind down about midnight. And then everybody would go quietly down to the Usk, to Mrs. R. And she would have shut the pub to the public, but not to the cricket club. And if you got home at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you did quite well, because they were quite characters as well. The playing field was level in later years. J.L. Stevens would supply a little dumper. They would bring it here on a Friday night on the way home and pick it up on Monday morning. And the community would come Friday nights, they would rake and pick stones, and then Di Hemmings, he was one of the labourers, he would drive the dumper, and the stone would be tipped way over the far end over there, which became the tennis courts and that eventually. But then when this all came up to green and things, they had a day to open it, should I say. And we had a thing called a push ball, which was a ball, a leather ball, which was about 6 foot in diameter. You had 5 aside, and it was a really good day as far as I can remember. I was too small to play that. I was not, because it would roll over you. They had a wonderful day, but they had injuries. Brian Stevens actually lost his wedding ring on the field. It could still be on that field now, and he hadn't been married long. He and Tony were big boys. And they said, we're never playing that game again. And I've never seen it played since. Another thing I did, there was a man called Sidney Townsend, which lived down there, and he came to me one day and he said, Ken, he said, I understand you do a little bit of wood turning. And I said, yes, I do a bit, but I'm not a sort of good wood turner. And he said, well, we'd like some skittles, he said. Do you think it'd be possible? And I said, right, I think the skittles would be no problem, but where are we going to get some ball? And where are we going to get some? He said, I'll find you some wood, he said. So I said, well, you find me some wood and we'll see what we can do. So the skittles that are here now and the ball I've made. My personal view then of the hall is what a thing for the community, what a thing to bring the village, but not only the village. We had people coming in from quite a distance, other places hiring the hall, which brought the revenue in, which was, you know, to repay for it and things like that. But it gave the whole community a lift, and has stayed on for many years. It was based from people who worked hard in the community, for the community, which has become harder to find now. People respected the hall, and that reflected across the community, and they wanted to look after it. One of the things that would happen fairly regular, I'd probably get a call from Stevens to say, can you go up to the hall because there's water coming out over the overflows from the flat roof. And what would you find? A tennis ball in the drain pipe. And you just pull that out and the water would go away. And I would probably have been told, you don't put that on your timesheet, you just write that off to somebody else. So they would be doing a courtesy in that respect. A cost saving to the hall. A strong community spirit.